open this up and start talking about some other countries around the globe. I'm based here in Texas in the United States. We get hurricanes. You're out in Dubai. You guys get sandstorms, both equally terrible, but your own unique challenges. Let's talk about how different companies are not all responding to this in the same way. We chat a lot about the United States here, Ayesha, but you follow a lot of different countries, excuse me, also. How about another developed economy, Japan? I know this is one that you have an informed opinion on. How is Japan handling the current macro?
So it's very interesting. I love how interesting the macro is in Japan. I mean, things are moving in a very different direction from what we've seen in the last 30 years. It's totally different now. The stock market is actually doing very well there, and we are bullish on the stock market in Japan. So more than half their companies are trading at less than book value. Did you know that?
Wow.
Yeah, that's insane. So cheap. And so there's a lot of value there, right? And with the new policies, with the new central bank governor, we might see some change in policies, but he's an academic. So he's taking things very slowly. They did announce some changes, which would mean yields would go up. So interest rates rising, bad for stocks. However, they are putting in policies, so they are still buying bonds there to make sure that this doesn't happen very suddenly. So what he basically said is they would allow the yield to go to 1%. Instead, they started buying as soon as the yield hit 60 basis points, which is 0.6%. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to measure and make sure that the impact is measured, right? And they're seeing inflation now for the first time in 3 decades. Inflation is good for stocks. We know this. And the kind of inflation that he wants to see before he changes any kind of policies is he wants to see this inflation take hold in a way that it improves wages and it improves consumption in the economy. Again, so consumption improving would mean better GDP, better for stocks, right? So I think that the policies that they're instituting now, they're good for the country as a whole. And anything that's good for the country is good for companies and is good for the stock market, right? So they're trying to help these companies now thrive and do much better. And I still think that, as you rightly pointed out, very cheap. They're still very cheap. But I would just caution against using the ETFs for exposure to the economy. So there is the ETF, which is EWJ. However, this is not currency hedged. So I would caution against, using any international ETF that is not currency hedged, because then we know the Japanese currency could come down. We are not bullish on the currency. We are actually bearish on the currency. So if the currency comes down, it brings the ETF down a little bit, so you'll get a muted response. There are hedged ETFs like I want to say HEWJ and DXJ. I believe these are the 2 hedged ETFs. So always try to be hedged or look at the currency before you're going into a country.
Certainly. And one of the biggest trends that Japan is privy to right now and is really capitalizing on has been AI and hardware and cloud computing. A lot of the components that are going into semiconductors are actually manufactured in Japan. As you mentioned, consumption rising, wages growing, certainly good as a lot of tailwinds in the semiconductor sector that's pretty leveraged to Japan.